My hypothesis remains the same. Game sales keep studios open. Exclusivity kills game sales. And if game sales are low, it can have an adverse effect on the studios that develop those games. This particular thesis is one that we can see on both sides. Largely, there's the conversation that, if exclusivity is actually apparent or present, it will goad more people to go in and buy hardware. This probably was true maybe 10, 15 years ago, perhaps maybe even 20 years ago. But today's market is actually very different. You cannot basically take that market paradigm, that reality, and come juxtapose it on top of what we have today, because what you're going to see is that the market has a lot of games. I remember I'd been talking about the Steam game releases from 2024, and this really gave me what I thought was a very good idea as to how many games are coming out on Steam. And I always proposed that number, and we tracked it and we watched it every single time. The crazy thing, though, is the summary ended up getting close to about 19,000 games launched on Steam. Some people said, well, a lot of it is shovelware and all of this stuff, but many of them don't realize that you can always go and see the top rated games in those particular categories. And when you actually look at the rated games in that category, you will realize that many of them are available in many places. What recently has come out is that Nintendo is also in a very interesting place, as well as PlayStation, where shovelware has also made themselves available on these platforms. And there's talk now that these platform holders are trying to do better to ensure that such shovelware is reduced. But if everything was shovelware, that'd be weird. However, the reality is there are small, tiny games coming out of small prices, putting market pressure on these big games. That including the live service, outrage, or I would say the outrage, live service. I can't even speak this evening. The live service insanity has also basically come to cut out of the entire conversation of what exclusives look like. I'm going to show you something that's very interesting. Stellar Blade developers think that it will sell better on PC than PS5. This is something that has resurfaced again after a financial report that they gave a while back. If you go and look at the headlines, it's starting to pretty much show up that the developers are gearing up for a PC release. I don't know where the, conversations eventually just, flew out of from. But in the last 17 and 19 hours, The Gamer and Windows Central have two articles talking about Stellar Blade. One of them alluding to the developers thinking it will sell better on PC than PS5. Another one alluding that it's going to be optimized for the Steam Deck and Rogue Ally. These two conversations are very interesting because if you actually track them down, it's going to go back to that conversation where the developers were looking at the potential of their sales compared to a game like Black Myth Wukong, where the developers did not lock themselves out of the PC ecosystem. Another really crazy event, and I alluded to this in my last two videos, is the developers of Godfall. They closed their doors late last year, which was very sad. And Godfall, there's conversation about whether the game was good or whether the game was bad. I mean, I've also heard people talk about their own, perceptions of Stellar Blade, and they don't seem to have the highest praise. That's why, one thing when we judge about the quality of a game or how a game appeals to somebody, it's usually subjective. I can say that because that game had the co-op aspect to it, it would have thrived from a multi-platform launch. Instead, what happened was it was death by 2,000 cuts. Cut 1,000 was it stayed exclusive on PlayStation, and cut 2,000 was it stayed exclusive on the Epic Games Store. Now, this is not just a small thing. The Epic Games Store is one which a lot of PC gamers pretty much put up a lot of resistance for them to basically play a game there. Now, I'm platform agnostic. Anybody who's going to give me a good deal, I will patronize them. However, Godfall did not attract that level of player, and the Epic Games Store on the gaming side, being primitive and all, not having too many functionality points that Steam has, does not attract a lot of players to buy their games here. I'm not going to say that no one buys their games here. I'm not going to go that far because I play Mortal Kombat on Steam and I see people on Epic Games all the time that are playing along the line. But they're nothing compared to other Steam players, other Xbox players, and even other PlayStation players when it comes down to the numbers. I guess not many people are using Epic Games services as many as Steam, obviously. So when you go ahead and you kind of dig through this, you ask yourself, ladies and gentlemen, why are the developers hoping to sell more than PlayStation? Well, it leads you to two major points. Those 2 points have to be addressed in today's video because I think we have to satisfy this particular conversation from the perspective of what the heck are we even doing? Point number 1, all of the claims that these so-called exclusives, basically sell console is pretty much damaged by the reality that these exclusives aren't even being bought by the people who are on the console already. How much more would people be willing to go spend $500 to buy another console? Number 2, multi-platform strategy is the way the market is dictating right now. So multiplat is where all these games need to go ahead and find themselves. I've seen a lot of people who are detractors of this reality. The problem is many of them don't have any numbers to show for it. If you ask them, they'll jump to Nintendo, of which Nintendo is not like PlayStation, and PlayStation is not like Nintendo. That is quite obvious. And the PC market, according to even this article here that was written just a few hours ago, is pretty much agreeing to the fact that in a AAA game market, PC devices have a higher market share than consoles. So we expect the performance of the PC version to exceed that of the console version. This is what the developers are saying. ShiftUp said this during its latest earnings report, as reported by VGC. We are primarily observing trends such as a significant expansion of the single-player action gaming market in the Asian gaming industry. And they basically were talking or likely referencing Black Myth Wukong. The conversation is actually quite interesting, ladies and gentlemen, because if you actually analyze and see what's going on here, then you can already tell that it's not necessarily the direction to go. What's even weird is, after this game launched, PlayStation was quick to beat this game as well as another exclusive, Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. PlayStation was quick to beat them to the PC market. Yes, PlayStation launched God of War Ragnarok and Marvel Spider-Man 2. And still, Black Myth Wukong, Stellar Blade is still on console, basically gathering dust because, again, like I said, its sales on console by now should have pretty much fizzled out. On PlayStation specifically, because it's not on both consoles. Another thing, too, is this game is limited by the fact that you can't port a game like this to Nintendo easily. You'd have to make significant investment and take significant time to allow for you basically modifying various aspects of the game to make it run on the Nintendo Switch. And so the game finds itself in limbo. Whereas other games are going to probably beat it to market, like Koei Tecmo's Rise of Ronin, which they desperately need those sales, because if they go ahead and depend on PlayStation, it's not going to happen for them. So this reality is what we need to look at and see that these games that are basically putting themselves in this particular, situation, they're going to be in a very narrow position at the end of the day as to how they are able to make and earn in a market that already has a saturation of games from everywhere. Saturation on PlayStation, from the live service side, even from shovelware and even other indie games and single-player titles from third-party developers. The same thing coming in even on Xbox's side. PC being a much more liberal platform that allows a lot more in terms of developer access. And then even the Nintendo Switch, who's also facing some challenges for everybody externally that spent all this money developing their games. As we're looking into the state of play, I don't know what PlayStation is going to unveil, but I'm very interested to see what it is that they come with. Are they going to bring some Wolverine gameplay? Time will tell. Thanks for watching the video. Peace out.